Okay. Okay. We're holding on the bottom of 105B, which is Kuf Hey Amid Beis. There's a Mishnah. Wow, it's hot. Okay. I think Hashem that you're able to learn Torah every day. And that's what's about learning, which is English. So learning Lili Nishmas Avigol Basbar Yamin and Nasanos have been Betzian. Also for Shleima for Avram, David, and Sarah. Dali gets Eliezer, Ben Begets Yipara. Okay. And for Moshe. Okay. Whoever needs to for Shleima. Okay. I'm a Kabal Sada Mechavere. Here we're talking about not a sharecropper. We're talking about someone that's leasing the field. So he leased the field from his friend, but the produce was eaten by grasshoppers, a nishtafa, or it was wind blasted.
That's considered a plague, right?
It's a plague, yeah. Well, imakas medinahi, if this was everyone like in the area had the same problem, then menachalei min chakuri, then he can take it off from his lease, from his payment. Mina makas medina, but if it's not everyone getting this, then in menachalei min chakuri, then he still has to pay. Then it's his own bad luck, and he has to pay. Now, I don't know why he doesn't have to always pay. Why doesn't he always have to pay? If you rent, if you lease a house, but you can't live in it, so then you would take it off the lease. You'd say, look, there's no air conditioning, there's no, so you'd say, I'm moving out, so I'm not paying for that time that I'm moving out. You'd probably charge the owner as well for your hotel stay. But over here,
no, if you're not paying him,
you have to pay. You have to pay. You pay, or in the one or the other.
Yeah.
Over here, it's a lease. He's supposed to be able to plant and to grow, and it's not growing. So he wants to take it off the lease. But why is it the owner's fault? What is he supposed to supply him with?
Is a chakor expected to pay with cash or with produce?
Credit card. It's officially with produce, but it's not necessarily with produce.
So the expectation is probably that he's going to, under normal circumstances, pay with produce from that field.
Yes. Since the rental agreement calls for the landowner, you see, no, you're showing me Rabbi Yehuda. I don't want Rabbi Yehuda. I want, which number were you saying?
35.
No, that's Rabbi Yehuda. That's a different opinion.
But then,
but that's Rabbi Yehuda. That's not going to be relevant until Rabbi Yehuda. Yeah, that's a different story. Yeah.
In fact, isn't he obligated to go and buy the produce? I thought he always is expected to.
He would have to. He would have to if he didn't if something happened to this or whatever.
So that would be why it's important that it happened in the whole countryside, because there's no produce for him to buy.
It's not going to match perfectly though.
No,
because that's not what Makas Medina actually means. You could still go to the store. Okay. We didn't put in the effort to the cultivator. Sure. He didn't put in all the effort.
And that's what he said. He had to go and buy.
When he that was something when he said he was going to buy from someone else. That's when he was telling the owner that I'm not planting. And I was like, but what are you going to tell? You going to pay me? So don't worry about that. I'll get from somewhere else. That was like, okay. Now, so if it's Makas Medina, so one thing's for sure, it's not this guy's fault. I understand. My only question is why is it the owner's fault? But in Mena Makas Medina, if it's not a plague of the whole country, we're going to see it doesn't mean country. So in Manakalem and Chakure, then he does not take off from his lease payment. He has to pay the regular lease payment. Rabbi Yudah says in Kibla Himena B'Mayis Benkach Manakalem Mechakure. If he's if he was paying money for his lease payment, not produce, then he anyways doesn't take off from the payment. And the reason for that is because the plague was on the produce, not on his money. So he can't claim any what's your term for Inus? Unpreventable. He can't claim any unpreventable circumstances regarding his money. He still owes the money. Okay, the Gemara now discusses Heichidami Makas Medina. What's a case of a plague against the country? What are we talking about? Am Rav Yudah kind of Ishtaf Ruba Debaga. Talking about that the majority of the valley or of the fields in his area have the same crop plague, which is blight, which is the wind comes and dries it up early, I think. Ula says it doesn't have to be the majority of that valley. It says just if his field, the field that he's leasing, plus the 4 fields surrounding it have the same problem, that's considered Makas Medina. Amar Ula says, they asked the question in the West. Okay, now the questions from the West are going to come. They're going to be like a whole bunch of questions. It's going to take up the whole next page almost. I don't know if they're all from the West, but there's going to be loads of questions here. Nishtaf telem echad al pnei kula. My. Let's say it wasn't all the fields, but it's one furrow. Now, is it saying, let me see how it puts it in your translation. One row of produce along the whole field was wind blasted. What is the law? It doesn't mean the whole field. It means all the fields around.
They didn't take it indoors.
Rabbi Yehuda said it needs to be most of the valley. According to Ula, it's only the 4 fields. Question is, let's say it's not all the 4 fields, but it's just one row along all the four fields. That's what it seems like. Then the question is,
Is Ula an Amira?
Ula is an Amira. Ula is a traveler.
How can he argue with?
So he's not arguing on Makas Medina. He's translating Makas Medina. Makas Medina meant the whole country, literally, but he's saying it doesn't mean the country, it just means that area. So he's retranslating. That Rabbi Yehuda said it just means that valley, and Ula says it means the fields that are surrounding it.
So are you saying that Yehuda also not disagreeing with Tanakh?
No, well, there's 2 Rabbi Yehudas here. There's Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah, and then there's Rav Yehuda. It's Rabbi Yehuda Bar Yecheskel. Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda Bar Bilai. So now Ula says that in the West, in Eretz Yisrael, which that's where he traveled from, he says if there's one row along the whole field that has this problem, what's going to along all the 4 fields? But let's say even if you would say that that's not enough because it's just one row, but let's say all the fields had the problem except for one row, would that still be considered that it's a Makas Medina? If Sika Biramai, let's say that the fields around him have it, but there was fields around him that were not plowed, they're left fallow. So do we say that if they would have been plowed, they would have got it as well, or maybe not? Maybe if they would have been plowed, they wouldn't have it. Aspastamai. Let's say what he planted was aspasta. Aspasta is I think it's wheat that's used for fodder. They let it grow for 1 month, then they cut it down, and then they let it grow another 2 times, and they cut it down every month, and then afterwards they let it grow, and I think it grows into wheat, or maybe not, but it's whatever. It's fodder. Now over there, you're not going to see the wind blasted because you don't let it produce the grain because you keep cutting it down early. So the fact that it never got this disease, does that mean that that it wasn't diseased, or does it mean that it would have been diseased had you let it go? Zara acher mai. Let's say what you planted was not the same thing that in the surrounding field that didn't get it. It wasn't the same thing that you planted here. And what about if it's wheat and barley? Let's say you planted barley, and surrounding it was wheat that did not get this problem. Okay. What was that? Oh, what was it? What's a father?
Said father.
Oh, father. Dr. Stein's here. When I mentioned father, so he said, "Oh, it's Father's Day." Okay. Chaim didn't even comment. Okay. Let's say that the whole world has shidafin, which is this wind blasted, and he ended up with yarkin, which is a mildew. So in other words, what we're saying here is if it's Makas Medina, if everyone has this problem, then he's going to be able to deduct it from his lease payment. But let's say everyone has like a slightly different problem, not the same as his. So over here, all these questions, Maria finishes with Teku.
Now it's 106.
Yeah. Teku. You leave these questions unanswered. Amalei, let's say the owner tells to the cultivator, he says, Zarachiti, I want you to plant in the field wheat. And as is the custom of workers, he does exactly the opposite. He plants barley, the ishtaf, and it ends up getting wind blasted. And most of the area gets this problem. And also his barley that he planted, which he wasn't supposed to, ends up getting wind blasted also. Do we say, do we say, well, look, everyone else planted wheat and theirs got wind blasted. If you would have planted wheat, if you would have listened, the same thing would have happened. Or maybe, maybe if you would have planted wheat, we would have had the fulfillment of the verse that says that he decreed and he said, and it was fulfilled, which means Rashi explains that he davened for that the wheat should come out well this year. And the problem is the guy planted barley, so he didn't daven correctly. Maybe if he would have planted wheat, then my prayers would have been answered.
It's the owner who's praying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he said, I didn't know what to pray for because you messed it up. So look at how the Gemara answers this. The Gemara says, "Mistabra darmalei izarata chiti avimekayim betigzar v'kamachval derechecha neigaor." It's logical that he can tell him that if you would have listened to my instructions, you wouldn't have had the problem. If you would have planted wheat, it would have come out good. You follow? This is a surprising answer. I'm surprised that Gemara said this. I thought it would be, look, everyone else that planted wheat had the problem. He planted barley and he also had the problem. And the guy's telling him, if you would have planted wheat, it would have been fine. So because I would have davened, then it would have helped.
Lease some property and make changes. The lease is nullified.
David's asking an interesting question. That if he made changes to the lease, he should be responsible for making changes to the lease. I think we say that more by damages. If you damage something and you made changes to it, so you become responsible for everything.
If I remember correctly, the other day you said changes.
Yeah, and here's a change. But here we're not discussing damages to the property. Here we're discussing, does he have to pay the lease because nothing was produced, not by him and not by the rest of the area. Yeah, but that is a valid point though.
Can you take it a step backwards? What happens if everything grew fine, but now he grew barley?
Then it's for sure his fault. If everything grew fine, then he just pays the lease.
I didn't want. But yes,
he says, "Well, what are you going to pay me?" He says, "I'll get you wheat from somewhere else." He can claim to that, but he still owes him. No, he can claim, "I wanted wheat from my field." Exactly. Remember, we had a Gemara like that.
So he has to get it from somewhere else. So it's not.
Yeah. So, let's say the landowner had a lot of fields, and all of them had the same problem. They were all wind blasted, and this field that this cultivator is in also had it wind blasted. But the rest of the area was perfectly fine. It's only the owner, his field, wherever he owned the field. It's as if they did an address search for this guy, and and every field that he had ended up. So take a look at this. Do we say the other fields in this area didn't have it? So it's the problem with the leasee, right? Lessee. Leaser. With the cultivator. It's his problem, right? Because he's the only one in this area that had it. Why, Delmar, do we say? Kivan the Eshtade Kulei Arasa, Matziamale Haimishim Lasadi Dachu. Or we can say, look, I checked out all your other fields in North Carolina and in Wyoming, and I see that they have the same problem. So it must be your mazel, your bad luck that caused your fields to. I'm not paying.
Could he get money from the leaser?
The leaser's bad mazel caused him to work.
Well, he's just not. Yeah. Hill is asking if he can get the damages because he had to sow the field and to work, and it's really his bad luck. Yeah, that I don't think you can claim from him.
He almost like the guy who was so poor that if he would make candles, the sun would never go down. He could take nobody was down. What's his name?
Yeah, Shlemazel.
Someone named Booth said if they would.
Yes, it was some famous person said that. You know who said that? He said if he would make candles, then the sun would never set, and if he would be if he made tachrichim, he said if he made shrouds, then everyone would stop dying. I don't know, but in the Mendi and the Golem, he said if it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have any luck. Okay. He says the Mishtadav calls Secha because all of your fields were wind blasted. So why should I pay? It's your bad luck. So Mistabra Darmalei, it's logical that we say like this: Imishum Lasadidi have Mishtayali Porta Kediksiv Kinishana Matmiharbe. Now this looks a little bit unfair. The answer that he says, no. It's not my bad luck. If it was because of me that this was wind blasted, then I would have been left with a little bit, because even someone that's getting punished always has a little bit left. This must be your problem, he tells to the cultivator. Says if it was my problem, if it was all because of me, then I wouldn't have had it. So here he gets like he's pulling it from different sides. He says, I would have davened on one hand if you would have just listened to my instructions, and I would have it would have grown well. And then he says, and even though everything else of mine got destroyed, but this one, it must be your fault.
It depends. His decree wasn't to get wiped out totally. 10%.
Right, but here he's claiming it. He's claiming that he wants to get paid. Yeah. Let's say the cultivator has other fields that were all destroyed by this wind blasting. And okay, so we say for sure it's his fault. He should have to pay. Only problem is that the other fields in this area, which were not by this cultivator, were also destroyed. So now he wants to take it off the thing. He wants to take it off the rent, the lease, and say that it's not my fault, this field, even though all your others were. But the fact is, there are other ones in this area were also wind blasted. Was it Ibn Ezra? Yeah, Ibn Ezra, very good.
I started selling candles, the sun would never come down. I started selling funeral shrouds, people would stop dying. If I went into the arms trade, the first peace would break out.
Wow.
Did he write it in Hebrew?
It was just
or in
written
Arabic?
like a poem. That was translated from Hebrew.
Oh. Dr. Stein found it from the Ibn Ezra. But
It sounded too good.
yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so me amrina, do we say given the started for the bagamanakile? Well, the Malach forgot to pinch Shalom. So if do we say that since the entire area was wind blasted, so he's allowed to take it off his lease? But since, or do we say the opposite? So do we say that since all of his lands were wind blasted, the owner can say, I checked out all your fields in Wyoming and in North Carolina and wherever else, and they all of them were ruined. So it must be that God is out to get you. It's your fault. Your bad luck. So the Gemara says, it's probable that he can tell him that it's all your fault. The Gemara says, 1 second, this is not fair. When it came to the landowner, he had an answer that he could have given him when he says this, that it's all your field. He could have said, well, even if it was out to get me, then I would have been left with a little bit. Now, when it comes to the cultivator, the owner tells him, it's obviously all your fault because you look at all your other fields and they were all ruined. So it must be your fault. And we don't give him the option of saying that, no, if it would have been me, then I would have been left with a little bit. Come on, answers. Amai. Why don't we, this is the continuation of the question, why don't we say that he could answer to the landowner, if it would have been because of me, then I would have been left with a little bit. My answer is Misham Damalei, because he would say to me, if you were meant to be left with something, would have been left from the lands that you own, not from the lands that you're cultivating, from your own personal lands.
That's your luck.
That's really yours. If you were meant to have something left, it would have been from something that you own, not from someone else's. This is someone else's land. Okay, it's interesting how we're taking luck into the equation to say if he is responsible to pay. Whose bad luck was it? Was it my bad luck? Was it your bad luck? If it was your bad luck, then I'm exempt. If it was my bad luck, then I'm responsible.
We all know it's the supplier of the seed affected. That's why it appeared in Wyoming and all these other places. Same supplier.
Could be. Comes in Monsanto.
That's right. Yeah, Oregon.
Yeah.
Where it might not also contribute to the situation, whether it's, especially if the grower or consumer had done this before, they made a contract that should cover this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. If there was a contract, then that would have resolved it. Yeah, then we would have had this taken care of. Here we're talking about where they just said, I'll lease the field and I'll pay you 10 bushels at the end of the year. And then it doesn't grow anything. And he wants to say that it's not my fault. Everyone else's field didn't grow either. Okay. Meisvei, yeah, this is real stuff. I mean, not for city people, but this is real stuff. Meisvei, the Gemara is a question. There's a rule that if someone sells a field, this is during the time of Yovel, when the field comes back after 50 years. So there's a rule that he has to leave it by the purchaser for 2 years before he can buy it back. He can buy it back, and right? We're talking about a field that was from his inheritance, and he sold it, and he can buy it back early. He can buy it back before the year, but he has to wait 2 years before he buys it back. In other words, you can't show up at the. He's allowed to buy it back, but you have to give the purchaser 2 years of produce before he can buy it back. So if in those 2 years there was a year where it didn't produce because of was wind blasted or because of mildew or because it was Shemitah or it was just a drought like the years of Elio. Elio caused the drought for 3 years, I think. Yeah. It would come back in 50 years also, but it's considered a sale anyway. Okay. Well, now the Gemara says, when it says that there was wind blasted or mildew, that was an example that was the same as the years of Elio. That was another example, years of Elio. Now, mashne de Elio layavitu klal, just like in the years of Elio, there was no grain at all. Afachanami layavitu klal. Also, when it's wind blasted and mildew, there's no grain at all. But if there is grain that's growing anywhere, then we don't consider it makas medina. So we were saying makas medina was your field with the 4 fields around it, or just in this valley. But that's not what we have from this other case when it comes to taking off, counting the years to be able to buy it back. Over there, it's when it's really no grain anywhere. The Gemara Amar of Rav Nachman Yitzchak says no. Shani Hasam there is different. It has to be, when can you say that this year doesn't count and you have to give the purchaser another year? That's if there's no grain at all in the world. But if there is grain in the world, then that's then that year is counted, and he only gets 1 more year. Keep it before the owner can come and purchase it back.
This almost sounds like we went through COVID with businesses not being able to produce or sell restaurants, compensations for them. Modern day.
Right.
What?
Be serious.
It was a virus. A virus is always mentioned. It's just
Amalei Ravashi the Rav Khan. Amalei Ravashi. This Ravashi says to Rav Khan. Rav Khan was a teacher of Ravashi. Elamayata. If so, Shvi is Talay Min Minyan. So Shemitah should count because the Katua b'chutz laaretz. What are you telling me that there can't be any produce in the world in order for it not to count? But Shemitah only applies in the land of Israel. So in the rest of the world there is grain. So why does that not count? If we're studying the verse and we're understanding from the verse that it needs to be no grain in the world in order for it not to count as one of the years for the purchaser, then Shemitah should not count. Shemitah should yes count. And it should be he should be able to purchase it back in another year. Amarlei, so Rav Kana responds to Ravashi, Shvius Afkasa de Malkihi. That's a different story. Shvius That's a decree of the king. It's not, the king said, God says that that's not counted as a year of produce. Okay, so that was a special rule. That's not counted. Amle Marzutra Breder of Mari Ravina. Marzutra, the son of Mari, says to Ravina, Almeata Shvias Leitala Tale Minagirua. 1 second. Now we have another story over here. If someone consecrates his field, it's makdish it, and then he wants to redeem it. So we calculate how many years there are left to the yovel, and however many years there are left to the yovel, he pays that a sela and a pundion per year. So it says 1 second. If Shemitah is not considered a year, then if there's, I don't know, 8 years left, he has to say 8 sela and 8 pundion. I think the 16 pundion in the sela or something. So we shouldn't count the Shemitah in there, because the Shemitah, one of those 8 years was a Shemitah year, and that doesn't produce. Alama Tanan, why was it taught in the Mishnah? Isn't selling pundion lashana that you have to give a selling pundion for a year when we never deducted Shemitah from it? If it's a afkasa de malka, rule of the king, that it's not considered a year of produce. I understand that you can't produce grain during the Shemitah, but you can still use your field to spread out fruits to dry, make raisins, make prunes, or, figs. They would dry figs. That was common.
Even though it doesn't
factory.
Right.
Even though it doesn't produce supposedly you have a triple crop in the 6th year, so that will include the Shemitah year. So when it counts, it should be the same.
No, but it's only counted as 1 year for produce. In other words, this guy consecrated his field until the yovel, right? And now he wants to buy it back. He wants to redeem it.
I understand,
when he redeems it, he pays a seller per year.
The 6th, the 7th, and the 8th year in reality is all coming from the 6th year. So again, in reality, the counting is the same without excluding any. Otherwise, you should exclude the 8th year, because 8th year couldn't produce anything. So it's not going to be done in the 7th year either.
Right.
So 6 made up with 6, 7, and 8.
Uh-huh.
They're allowed to use it for you.
I'm sorry?
They're allowed to use it for the dry thing.
Yeah.
They wouldn't come and take it. But they wouldn't think that the people are working in the field.
It's only the produce. It's only what grows in the field wild that they doesn't mean they can come and take whatever you have. They can't take your house. They can't take your car. They can't. Produce that was grown in the Shemitah year. You could put up a sign and say that this was grown last year or something. You know. Okay. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel comes in with a statement. Lo shanu. This was only taught if he planted and it grew, but it got eaten by grasshoppers. But if he doesn't plant at all, we don't say this. Because we can say, even though the other fields around him got wind blasted or the grasshoppers came or whatever. Because if you would have planted it, the owner says, you would have been successful, because I have special schusim, and these things don't happen to my field, right? The fact that you didn't plant it is a loss. Is a loss, and you still, just because everyone else had this, it doesn't mean that that it would have happened to me. Master Rav Shesha asks a question. You have a shepherd that was irresponsible. He left his flock. He comes to the city. A wolf comes and tears up. We had this recently, actually. A wolf comes and tears up the sheep. Or a lion comes and attacks them. We don't say, had he been there, he would have been able to rescue them, so it's all his fault. Rather, we evaluate. If he would have been able to rescue them, then he's chayiv. But if he wouldn't have been able to rescue it, then he's pater. Why do we say this? We could say that we could tell him that if you would have been there, you would have been able to kill the lion and the bear like King David did when he was telling Shaul why he should be able to fight Goliath. So what do you mean? I killed a lion, I killed a bear. So if you would have been there, you would have been able to. In other words, if you're able to, if the owner of the field is able to tell the cultivator, had you have planted, everything would have worked out because miracles do happen. Because I have special chusim. So why do we say by the shepherd that if you would have been there, you wouldn't have been able to do anything anyway? 1 second, if you would have been there, maybe miracles would have happened. You would have been able to fight off the lion and the wolf or the bear. The answer to that is because he says, if this is the cultivator tells to the owner or the shepherd. Here's the shepherd. The shepherd tells to the owner of the sheep. He says, if you really think that you would have had a miracle, then why didn't the miracle happen? A miracle could have happened, like what happened with Rabbi Chanina ben Daisa. Chanina ben Daisa had, this is a story when he found the chickens, I think. The chickens in his yard. It could be. It's Gemara Tainus also. Yeah. What happened was he held them for the owners, but they got too many. So instead of having chickens, he took the eggs and everything that belonged to the owners, and he bought goats. Bought goats. Then the neighbors were saying that the goats were eating from their fields. So he said the goats were not eating from your fields. If the goats were eating from your fields, then they should something. And if not, they should come back this evening with beers on their horns. And that evening they came back with their horns were stuck into beers. They come back with the beers on their horns. So he's saying like this, that if you were supposed to have a miracle, that you're claiming that it's my fault, because if I would have been there, then you would have had the miracle. He said, then you should have had the miracle on your own. Your goats should have pierced the lion and the wolf. And so, yeah, they used the David Melech. At this point, he didn't have that. At this point, he didn't have that. At this point, he didn't have that. Because at this point he put on shul.
What if he had a special? The shepherd has something special miracle tool.
No, he wore Shul's armor at this point. Yeah. Right. So the Gemara says v'neimalei, but he can respond to this. He can say, well, I'm not eligible for massive miracles, but I am eligible for small miracles. And if you would have been there, then we would have had the small miracle. Like the book, Small Miracles. Okay. So the Gemara says, Kasha, well, okay, we're left with the question. What was our question? That we said that the guy in the field says that had you had planted it, we would have had a miracle. And here we say that had you had been there, we don't say had you had been there, there would have been a miracle by the shepherd. Sorry?
And somchim alanas.
In somchim alanas.
He uses noch as a
right.
as a legal.
Well, the thing over here is that he was irresponsible. And usually we say, usually we say Tilasa B'Shia V'Seifa Bainas is Machlaikas. But let's say we say Tilasa B'Shia V'Seifa Bainas is Chayav. So you shouldn't have left the sheep. So that's a Pshia that you left the sheep. Now what happened at the end was a lion came and you wouldn't have been able to do anything anyway. But if we can connect the fact that the lion came to you being there, to you not being there, and really this you're there's any slight connection to it, then we can claim that, well, we'll go back to the Tchilas of B'Pshia, you never should have left. So
they're trying to take us back to the field.
You know, the field, the guy didn't even plant. He didn't plant it all. And now the owner's saying that the cultivator's saying, well, if I would have planted, I would have lost everything because look, everyone else lost. So he's saying you didn't even try. If you would have planted, we would have had success.
When the owner is saying, it's your bad luck. I would have davened. Honey, Magel. I never heard of this guy. He should be more famous out there. If I daven, everything grows. I would have been talking about this guy big time.
I think these guys exist. They just we just pushed them off. We pushed them off, but
elevated faith like some churros. Elevate the physical.
Right.
Elevate the seeds.
Right.
I pray everyone. But the text of
All right. The Gemara says kasha. We don't have a teretz to this contradiction. Tani Chada, there's one brisa that says Pamishena Vishniya Zara. Now that that he has to plant. We're talking about Shmuel, so we're saying that he has to plant if he wants to get if he wants to get off the lease, he has to plant it. One brisa says that he has to plant it the first time, and even if locusts come or whatever, grasshoppers come or it gets this wind blasted, he has to plant it the second time as well. Felicious, but the third time in Zaire, he doesn't have to plant it. If it happened 2 years in a row. Haniyida, there's another brisa that says Shlishis Zaire, Ravias Zaire, that he has to plant it a third time. It's only the fourth time that he doesn't have to plant it. The Gemara says, well, contradiction between brises that we can answer with Lake Kasha, Rebbe Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. The famous machlokes in Rebbe and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. How many times is a chazaka? Rebbe holds that a chazaka, an assumption, takes only 2 times. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel holds 3 times is a chazaka. Yeah, we hold that it's 3 unless it's comes to matters of life and death, which we say is 2, and that's why the woman that 2 husbands died doesn't get married the 3rd time. 2 times is a chazaka. In certain cases, right? We go by certain.
You're waiting for if you gotta make a decision. It's a life and death decision.
So every widow, according to you, every widow.
No, every life or death decision. You don't wait for it to happen again. You make the decision.
Right. That's what this is about. You couldn't blame necessarily the woman for this to happen.
You should get life insurance.
What we're saying, it happened the second time now. Otherwise, there's no direct
Right.
I'm not married. So I'm married 46 years.
They
hire you know what Jeff said? They check on the life insurance premium. Have you been married to a black widow?
check here.
Next motorcycle and parachute.
Rish Lakish says Leishano Leshazara Vitzamcha Bachlachagav. Aval Zara Vleitzamcha Matzyam Le Balakarka Kol Yimei Zera Zara Le Vazal. When do we say that we take the first year, the second year, the third year, and then we say you can stop? That's only if he planted and it grew, but it got eaten by the grasshoppers. But if he planted and it didn't grow, then the balakarka, the owner, can tell him, you have to keep planting, plant again, keep working the field, keep putting seeds in, keep turning the soil, watering. Let's see if it's going to grow. Vademas, how long does that have to go on? Rav Papa says, Adasi Arisi Midabra, Bekaima Kima Rishayo. Rav Papa says they have to wait until, keep planting until the sharecropper comes back from the field and the star Kima. What star is that? What constellation?
Pleiades.
What is it? Pleiades is on his head. Yeah, it's a certain constellation. Now Rashi says that this constellation would come at the beginning of Adar. Rashi has a whole description over here about the 12 constellations, that how they go to this one rises and one sets. That's in a day, and it just how this whole thing. Rashi has this big description here, if you want to go through it.
You hold by that.
Yeah, I don't know, but
It's real.
Yeah. There's a question over here if it's really Adar, if it's earlier. What does your note say? Rashi says that it's end of Shvat. Rashi says beginning of Adar. The end of Shvat is Adar, so that's okay. Rav Papa 8. An Aris usually leaves an Aris. Aris is if the constellation is the sharecropper. He usually leaves the field at the end of the 10th hour of the day. If the constellation Kima stands overhead in the middle of the sky at that time, it's still considered the planting season. This time corresponds to the month of Adar as follows. Okay, so in the art scroll they have the chart. Below is the chart with months. You'll see it in the chart. It's a huge note over here. Tosfos objects to Rashi's explanation, offers an alternative explanation.
So this is the second time now today's Daf Yomi talking about Mazolos, which is
right.
Unusual to this.
Yeah, I was just saying.
What?
No. You're using mazel and luck as a.
Yeah, but here this is not. This is not. This is just a description of how long you should be planting. So it's saying, well, what's the season? And we're describing the season. Yeah, we're not looking at like, oh, this is a good mazel or a bad mazel. This is like, when's the season, the planting season over? We say that's going to be when this mazel kima is going to be in the 10th hour. Yeah. You have a question. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says name of Reb Meir, and Reb Shimon ben Menashe also says Chatzi Tishrei v'Chatzi Mar Cheshvan v'Chatzi Kislev Zera. We're going to divide the year into 2 months. So the first one says a half a month of Tishrei, the whole Cheshvan, and half of Kislev. That's the planting season. That's going to be a problem because we said that he has to continue planting until Adar. Chatzi Kislev v'Chatzi Tevis Chatzi Shvat. Half of Kislev Tevis and half of Shvat is Cherif. That's the winter season. So you can't do much then. That's when you pickle your cucumbers or something. Chatzi Shvat v'Adar. Chatzi Nisan is Kor. That's still the cold. Chatzi Nisan Iyar Chatzi Sivan is Kasher. That's the harvest. Chatzi Sivan Chatzi Sivan Tamas Chatzi Av is Kayetz. That's the summer, which that Kayetz I think means the fig harvest. Chatzi Av Elul Chatzi Tishrei is Chaim. That's the hot season. That's the summer. That's the end of the summer. Well, our question is, we're not done yet. I'll explain the question in a minute. Rabbi Yehuda, my name is Tishrei. Rabbi Yehuda does this a little easier because he starts, instead of starting in the half month of Tishrei, he starts at the beginning of Tishrei. Rabbi Shimon, my name is Cheshvan. Rabbi Shimon starts from, instead of the beginning of Tishrei or midway through Tishrei, he starts with Cheshvan. So that would mean, according to him, the planting season is Cheshvan and Kislev, according to Rabbi Shimon. Well, Man Mekel Bekulu. Who's the most lenient over here? Which means who says that it lasts the longest? Reb Shimon. So Reb Shimon, he says that you have until the end of Kislev. Bekuli Hai like Kamri, but he doesn't say until Adar. So how did Reb Papa get that the owner can tell the cultivator, I want you to keep working until Adar? It's like Kasha. It depends if he's going to be planting wheat or if he's going to be planting barley. Remember, by the hail, it says because because they're planted later, so they're still soft. And the barley's planted later, so that's why it has the season goes later. Rabbi Yehuda said, that if he accepted to pay money, then he always has to pay the money, even if it doesn't grow anything. If the leaser, right? The leaser was made up not to pay produce, made up to pay money, then even if it doesn't grow anything, he still has to pay for the lease. Aguda Dinar Malka Saba. There was a fellow that got a field. He leased a field. He was going to plant in it garlic, and he was going to plant along the river of Nahar Malka Saba. That's the name of the river. The Old King, the River of the Old King. It sounds like a Chinese river. Bezuzi, and he was going to pay money for this as the payments for the lease. It's stuck in our Malka Saba. Well, the river got dammed. And what happened? Did it flood?
It was a canal.
Oh, it was a canal. And I guess it got stopped up higher up and it dried up. That was probably what happened. So it got dried up.
You damn it.
It was blocked, so the water didn't come. Not that it flooded, the water didn't come. So Amarle, Sasalakami de Rava, come to Rava. Amarle, Rava says, Nahar Malka Saba Layavad de Mistaka. This usually doesn't happen. Miskar. Makas Medine, this is a plague of the country. You should be exempt from paying the lease, right? Zil Nakile, you go deduct the payment from the lease. Amla Rabbanan Ravas, the student said to Rava, Anantanan Rabidam Kible Mena Bamayis, Benkach Benkach in Menakle Min Fikure. But Rabbi Yehuda says that if you're supposed to be paying money, that you don't deduct from the lease. And here he was supposed to be paying money, not produce. Amalei, lest the Chashle led Rabbi Yehuda. Rava says no one suspects Rabbi Yehuda, he's just an individual. And the sages argue on Rabbi Yehuda. So according to the sages, there's no difference if he's paying money or if he's paying produce, it's going to be exempt because this was a Makas Medina.
I don't remember when, but we once did something. I don't know if it's the same thing where the water was being taken by the
someone higher up.
Yeah. And then that affected where you were.
Hello, you remember?
Riverbed.
We're talking about who has the rights to divert the river. Someone wanted to divert the river higher up. The people down below were claiming that they can't do that. We're relying on that water.
What was the answer?
Gittin. It was in Gittin. They had been in Gittin. Okay.
Come on, guys, you need to remember what we learned.
To do Chazara. It's still a first time we go, the
next one.
First life.
Mekabel sada mechavere basara kur chitin lashana velaksa leisin lemiteicha. Someone here we're talking about a lease. Someone leased a property. He makes up he's going to pay 10 kur. Each kur is 30 sa, 300 sa of wheat for the year. Velaksa. Problem is that the wheat came out very poor, very not healthy wheat this year. So he gives the wheat from whatever produced. Rashi explains that this is specifically chiddush, even though it's a lease, because with the sharecropper, then we know that he gets a percentage. If it's a lease, even though it's a lease, he can still give this lousy grain. If the wheat came out very good, then he's not able to tell the owner, I'm going to get you other wheat that's not this good to pay you. Rather, he has to give wheat from the field itself. Like we said before, the owner says, I want wheat from my own field. I don't want you giving me wheat from someone else's field. There was a guy that he accepted. He leased a field, and he was going to grow in it fodder. It means you have to harvest it every 30 days. And he was going to pay barley. So it grew the fodder, and he plowed it again. And instead of letting the aspasta grow again or more of that, he decided to plant the barley in it to get what he's going to owe to the owner. And it turned out that he had bad luck. And luckily, it got ruined. The barley got ruined. Shalchal Rav Chaviva Misura, the Prasla Kamid Ravina. So Rav Chaviva, or Rav Chanina, some say from Surah of Pras, of the Euphrates, sends a question to Ravina. Ki agavna mai. What's the halacha? He laksa nice lamitecha dami. It's not good. Can he pay from the lousy grain that grew? Amalei midami. How can you compare? Hasam leyav darish dechusa demara. Over there, when it says that he can pay from the grain that grew, that's because the land did not do what the owner wanted it to do. So, in other words, over there, when in the Mishnah, when he planted wheat, which is what he was supposed to plant, so he pays. It didn't produce so well, but he pays whatever it did produce. But Hacha over here, Avdar Arish Tifusa Demara, the owner wanted it to do aspasta, to do fodder, and it grew the fodder. It didn't do what he wasn't supposed to do. What he didn't do the barley, but that's his fault. That's the cultivator's fault. He should go and get other grain to pay for his lease. Who gathered the couple of pardes mechavri besedani chamra? Was a guy that leased a vineyard. He was going to give 10 barrels of wine for the lease. Takapu chamra produced grapes and he made it into wine, and the wine went bad, turned into vinegar. Savra of Kanalamema hani masnisen laksa nice lamitaycha. This is exactly what the Mishnah says. The Rav Kana thinks that you can give the wine from the field itself. Amalei Ravashi midami. Rashi says, how can you compare? Over here, it produced the grapes. What didn't happen? The wine went bad, but the land produced the grapes. You have to go get wine. That's good. Mm-hmm. The fact that the wine spoiled, that was maybe the winemaker's fault. He didn't seal it. He didn't do it. He did something wrong to it. Ravashi would agree that if the grapes were wormy, or the field didn't have good bundles, whatever. Mm-hmm. So that would be a different story. But over here, the field produced properly. It was just the winemaker that messed up. He can't pay the owner with the lousy wine.
Below the finish.
Yeah.
The business was,
right.
Shouldn't be paid in grapes before.
Well, they made up that he was going to pay him with the wine. Yeah. Someone leases a field and he says that he's going to plant wheat. Grain. I'm sorry, he's going to plant barley. He should not plant wheat. But if he says he's going to plant wheat, then he's allowed to plant barley. Now, the explanation for this is that the wheat damages the field more than the barley does. Mm-hmm.
It's not about him doing what he said he's going to do. Like if he tells the
not specifically.
Or about the owner just making sure his field comes back at least as good, if not better. And he agreed to do this.
So if he made up to plant wheat, then for sure he can plant barley, because barley is less harmful to the field. Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, you're not allowed to say change what you made up. Now, the following piece of the Mishnah is easier, at least for our modern science, to change it to a different version. But let's read it as it says. It says, Tvua, if he made up to plant grain, he's not allowed to plant legumes. Kitnius, but if he made up to plant legumes, then he's allowed to plant the grain. Now, what the Mishnah seems to say is that the legumes are more harmful to the field, and if he agreed to plant legumes, then for sure he can plant the grain. However, that's not what science tells us today. Legumes are supposed to be very good for the field. What's it called? Nitrogen fixation. Is that what it's called? The word? When the nitrogen turns into
the roots fix nitrogen.
Right. So it's supposed to be very good. So the what's it called? The Gra changes the Girsa. The Rif and the Rambam have it exactly the opposite. That if it's Kitnius, you made up to plant legumes, you're not allowed to plant.
Already. It's modern.
I'm sure they know all of this
you
stuff.
Just said it was a modern.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it has a note over here.
It should be switched. Okay. Reb Shimon Gamliel, I see Reb Shimon Gamliel again says that you're not allowed to change it. Okay. Amr Rav Chisda. What's the reason for Amr Rav Chisda? Rav Chisda is my time with Reb Shimon Gamliel. What's the reason for Reb Shimon Gamliel? The Tziv Sheis Yishal Yasu Avalei Daber Kazav L'Yimtzu Kiyam Lashon Tarmis, that the Jewish people should not deceive, and they shouldn't speak falsehood, shouldn't find in their mouth tongue of deception. Meisvei, the Gemara has a question. Magvis Purim LePurim. When there's a Purim collection of the collecting tzedakah, the money's supposed to be used for Purim. And we're not specific about this. It means, what does that mean? That we don't, even if there's going to be waste, I think. A poor person is not allowed to buy a shoelace with this money unless he makes up with the people. Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov says the name of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that he's allowed to switch. He's allowed to do these other things.
If he was collecting, he could also use it.
He could use it for his shoelace. Amar Abaya. So the problem is, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says by us that you're not allowed to switch anything. Here he says you are allowed to. We're on top of Kuf Zion 107. Abaya says time Reb Shimon Kedemar. The reason for Reb Shimon is like the master says, which is the master for Abaya is Rabba Bar Nachmani. Says Damar Mar, the master taught Haimad Nichale the Tit Parare Lizr Shata Chiti V'Shata Sari Shata Shesi Shasa Erev V'Layam Anel Dlei Karavitani Aval Karavitani Leslambar. So what's happening here is that if a person wants his field to be fallow, so he has another way of doing this, is that 1 year he plants wheat, the next year he plants barley. Or 1 year barley, 1 year wheat, or 1 year he plants it this way, the next year he plants it that way. He makes the rows the opposite way. But that's only if the Leikara Vitani, that he didn't plow it after he harvested. I'll explain. So in other words, he's giving but if he plowed it afterwards, then there shouldn't be no problem. But the idea over here is like this. The reason for Shimon ben Gamliel say that you're not allowed to switch, even though it looks like it's better for the field, is because you don't know what the owner did last year. Maybe the reason why you're not allowed to switch is not because of you're not allowed to change anything. The reason you're not allowed to switch is because last year the owner did barley. So we don't want you to do barley again because that's going to affect the field. Because even though one of them causes more harm to the field, but that really depends on what was done the previous year.
So he's saying,
and what he's going to do the following year.
That's Mekel?
Shimon ben Gamliel says you're allowed to switch. It's only over there where you're not allowed to switch because it's going to harm the field if it's 2 years in a row the same crop.
Not related.
So it doesn't have to do with switching. The main problem is that it's going to affect the field.
Is it because he's diverted from the other?
No, it's because you don't know what the owner did last year and what his reason is. But it's only because it's harmful. It's not because there's no rationale. Just I said so. It's not because of the I said so. That's what we thought before. It was like the I said so. Here it's like, no, there's a rationale for it because but it's going to harm the field.
Practically speaking, is it better to switch? Is it better
I think to rotate the crops.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
Peanuts.
These are 2 grains. They were into a rotation. That's barley, wheat, barley, wheat.
Right.
It might have been other kinds of fertilizers from the animals.
Right. This river? The same river? Oh, really? Uh-huh. Oh, interesting. Okay. We said in the wording of the Mishnah was that if the owner said that you could plant grain, you shouldn't plant legumes, but we said maybe it's the opposite. So Masnile Rav Yehuda l'Ravin. Rav Yehuda taught Ravin Tvua Yisrana Kitnis. He taught it the other way. He said grain. You could still allowed to plant legumes. But we learned in the Mishnah that if you plant the grain, you can't plant legumes. It depends if it's for Israel or if it's for Bavel. In Israel, there's mountains, and we're more concerned about the weakening of the soil. But in Bavel, so the oil is the water is very moist. The land is very moist. We're not so concerned about it, so therefore it's you're allowed to switch. Yeah. Is it? Don't they always say like this thing? Typical news headlines. What is that? Oh.
Actually, seawater is over time is actually very more.
Oh. Okay. Amalei Rabbi Yehuda l'Ravin bar. Is it Rav Nachman? Yeah. What do you have in English, Rav Nachman? Ravin Achi. Rabbi Yehuda says to Ravin, Ravin, my brother, Hani Tachli de Bekisna. This cress, which is that what you brought in? Did you ever bring in cress? It's a type of like little grass. You're allowed to take it if you see it growing in the field. It's growing if it's growing amongst the flax, you're allowed to take it because it ruins the flax. So if you go in and you take it, the owner is only going to be happy. I'm this al gvulin, but if it's on the border, then yesh ben mishum gesel, then you're not allowed to take it. But if it already grew to the point that it's already has the seed in it, I feel the bekitna nami. Even if it's growing amongst the flax, you can't take it because yesh ben mishum gesel my timer. What's the reason? My dafsid. However much it's going to ruin the flax, it already ruined the flax. Whatever's left, the guy was going to want to keep it. Amr Rabbi Yehuda Ravin bar Rav Nachman. Rabbi Yehuda says to Ravin, Achi, Ravin, my brother, Hani dili dilach. They were neighbors. It says the fruits that grow in my field, dilach, they're really yours. But dilach, and the fruits that grow in your field, dili, are really mine. And this is because the roots of the tree was growing on the other person's field. Nog b'nei matra ilain hanoita lakan hanoita lakan. Because people that live on the border, the tree that's leaning to this way belongs to this one, and the tree that's leaning that way belongs to that one. But Rashi seems to say that it's not just the tree leaning, it has to do with the roots, where the roots are growing. Ditzmar, it was a statement, Ilan Ayman ala Metzar, Amarav, Anait Lakan Lakan, Vanait Lakan Lakan, Shmuel Amachalkin. Shmuel says no, the tree on the border is always divided. Well, Meisvei, the Gemara is a question, Ilan Ayman ala Metzar Yachlaiko, it's a question on Rav. It says that you always divide the fruits of the tree on the border. The Tif to the Rav. This is a strong question on Rav. Shmuel Rav. So Shmuel answers according to Rav. This is where we see that they cared about the truth. That even if they had an argument, they still wanted to make sure the other one, could be right. The Mamalik Kalametza Kulai over there is talking about the entire border was full of trees, were full of roots, and so therefore it wasn't going just to one side. That's why over there it was that you would divide it because it's going to both sides. So what's the chiddush? Why do I need a brisa to tell me that? Now we're talking about that the heavy fruits are leaning over one side. So nevertheless, what's the chiddush? It's still you divide the whole tree. Could have thought that maybe we say no, you divide the tree crosswise this way. Why are you dividing it like this way? You should divide it this way, which means that they both get half of the produce. Amalei Rav Yehuda l'Ravin bar Rav Nachman.
Fruit, giant branch broke. The tree came down. Not the top of the tree came down on the fence, and half of it was on one side, and half of it was on the sidewalk side.
jelly
go
together.
by and take the stuff on the sidewalk side.
I think only when it goes into. I think only when it's on the floor.
But it's disconnected.
I know, but I don't know. I'm not sure. Can you take it if it's
public property? On public
I know, but
air.
it's not. It's in public air. It's not on the floor yet.
It's mamish meaning. Does that mean it's a responsibility of the owner
if it was a tree
and
cut it?
Cut it and take care of it. If it was a tree and it was on the swale, they would have responsibility to maintain it. Yes, it will be up high. Storm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I went by and said, "Whoa, what? It's facing the wrong way." On the fence. It's so strange, just like you think.
Does it have the fruit on it already? I think they're very small now. I think.
Yeah. But it's like it was facing the wrong way, so what's going on?
Okay. My brother, don't sell land, or don't buy land that's close to the city. Because there's even a statement from Rabuna, Rabavo, the name of Rabuna, name of Rav, that you shouldn't be looking at someone's field when the stalks are growing, because it's going to create an ayin hara. So you're not allowed to do that. You shouldn't even buy a field that's going to be near the city, because people are going to look at your stalks, and it's going to create an ayin hara. Aini, is that so? Vashkechinu Rababa l'talmidei de Rav. Rababa found the students of Rav. Amalu, he said, "Ma'im Rav b'hani kroi." How does Rav translate these verses? Baruch atah b'yir, baruch atah b'sada. Blessed are you in the city, blessed are you in the field. Baruch atah b'vecha, baruch atah b'tzisacha. Blessed are you when you enter, blessed are you when you go out. V'amrulei, the students of Rav told to Rababa, Achi Amar Rav, this is the way Rav translated. Baruch atah b'yir, blessed are you in the city. Shehei beischa samach l'beis hakneses. Your house should be close to the shul. That's a big blessing. And whenever they need a minyan, they say, get in there, that's enter. Blessed you in the field. How is that translated? Your property, your field should be near the city. Blessed you when you enter. When you come home, you shouldn't find your wife that's a suffix nida. You won't be able to be with her. Blessed you when you leave. She had said, that your descendants should be similar to you. Well, Ramalahu Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan said to that, that he never, that this is not, don't say it like this. And does Rabbi Yochanan say that Rav didn't say? Rabbi Abba. Amar Lahu, Rabbi Abba said to them, Amar Lahu, Rabbi Abba said, Rabbi Yochanan la Yamar Hachi. It's not Amalu Rabbi Yochanan. Amalu, Rabbi Abba said to them, Rabbi Yochanan la Hachi. Rabbi Yochanan didn't say it like this. Hachi Hachi. Ella, rather, the way Rabbi Yochanan translated is, Baruch atah be'ir shei beis hakisi samach l'shulchanecha. Blessed you in the city that you should have a bathroom close to your table. There's a Chassidish interpretation of this, that you should always look at the food, that it's always just going to turn into waste. That way you don't have to get excited over food. That, whenever you see food, you should just think about that. Well, it's all going to be the same.
It's like marble plus or marble.
Right. Aval beis hakneses lai. He didn't say that you should have the beis hakneses near your house. Why? Rabbi Yochanan follows his own reason. Damar schar psias yesh, because it's good to walk far to a shul, because you get more schar, you get more reward the longer you walk. There's advertisement for the shuls all the way up there. Baruch atah b'sada, blessed you in the field, that your possessions should be divided into thirds. Shlish b'tvua, 1/3 should be in grain. Shlish b'zeisim, another third should be in olives. Shlish b'gavana, 1/3 should be in grapevines. Baruch atah b'veyacha, baruch atah b'tzeisacha, blessed you when you enter, blessed you when you leave. And when you're leaving the world, it should be the same like when you came. Just like when you entered the world, it was without sin. So too, when you leave the world, it should be without sin. And our problem now is that you told me that you shouldn't buy a field near the city. You told me that's a blessing to have a field near the city. Like Kasha. There's no question. The Mahadale Shura Baraska. One is where it's surrounded by a wall, and so therefore people can't look in. Yeah, it's not surrounded by a wall. Hashem will remove from you all illnesses. Amarav. Rav explains, Zu Ayin. This is talking about Ayin Hara, the evil eye. Rav Latamei. Rav follows his own reasoning. The Rav Salak Lebei Kibri. Rav went into a cemetery. Ovid Maida Ovid. Somehow he whispered to the graves. He understood how each one died. And Amar, when he came out, he said, Tishim v'tisha b'ayin ra, v'echad b'derech eretz. One died naturally, the rest died because of evil eye. Shmuel Amar, Shmuel says, Zeh ruach. What does it mean when God's going to remove all illnesses? It's going to remove the wind. It says everything comes from the wind. That's the yeah. We would say today it means bacteria or something, infection. It's called say infection. Airborne, right? Main cause of. Who says that? Doctor? Who is the doctor? Sebi.
The main cause of it is
okay. So Shmuel says Ruach. Shmuel Latamei. Shmuel follows his reasoning. Shmuel says a kol beruach. Everything has to do with the winds. 1 second. Shmuel Malchus. What about the people that died because of get killed by the government, get killed by the sword? It says Hanach Nami, says even them. If not for the winds, that's why I want to say infection, they would have been able to put him back together, to put the head back on and heal him. Rab Chanina Amar Zutzin. Rab Chanina says referring to cold. Rab Chanina taught a kol bidei shamayim chutz mitzinim mepachim. Everything in the hands of heaven is except for cold. Yeah, a cold. You should have wore a coat. I'm sorry? Cold and heat. Cold and heat. The cold and heat in the way of the stumbler, for someone that protects his soul, should distance himself from them. Rabbi Yosi Bar Chanina Amar Zutzaya. This is excrement. Damar it's referring to mucus. Damar Tzaya Sachitim, Tzaya Sa'iz, and Ruba Kashan Mut and Yafa. It's a lot of it is bad, but a little bit is good. Okay. Rabbi Lazar Amar Zumara. Rabbi Lazar says this is the gall. Tani Namiachi was also taught in a Braisa Machla when it says illness, Zumara, that's referring to the gall. Laminikushmei Machla, why is the gall called illness? She Machla called Gufei Shaladam, because it causes illness to the whole body. Davar Acher, another pshat, Machla Sheshmainim Ushleisha Chalayim Tluyim B'mara, because there's 83 illnesses that come from the gall. Kulan Pas Shachris B'melach V'kitin Shalmayim Mevatlasan. All of them go away by eating breakfast with bread in the morning with some water. Taner Rabbanan was done in the Bryce Yud Gimel Dvarim Never Pas Shachris. Bread and salt and a jug of water. It was taught in a brisa. There's 13 things that were said regarding. Is
that true, by the way? Most stuff.
There are a lot of illnesses, doctor, that happen because we learned before that what it says in the Gemara about that was what has many interpretations as to whether that was just at that time for those people or for the future. Therefore, I am making any comments in front of the Rob as to Rob your question.
Rambam.
They think the Rambam himself doesn't follow the Gemara. That's like a proof.
No, but much of
probably.
Listen, medicine now, they say, doubles every year, the knowledge in medicine. one of the reasons I retired. I couldn't keep up with it. So what we know now, and what we knew then,
right?
You know, I mean, certain
how
things
often
always
does medicine go back and say, we shouldn't have trashed that? There's actually some wisdom back then. It happens. Is it common or is it uncommon?
But certain things are always true, like diagnosis. I mean, you can make, if you're a good diagnostician, that doesn't change, but the treatments change, improve.
Right. Okay. There's 13 things that were said about bread in the morning. Number 1. Ready? Matzelas menachama menatzina. It protects a person from heat and cold. Menazikin. It's from the winds that we said. Shmuel says. Menamazikin, from the demons. Machkimas pesi. It makes the fools intelligent because they're more relaxed after they eat breakfast. Badin, and it even makes a person correct in judgment. He's able to answer the court better after he ate. It helps him study Torah and to teach because he's more calm. And his words are heard because he's able to explain things better. He's able to learn better. The ein b'sarim malahevel doesn't have a sweat or a smell coming from his body. He's also more with his wife. He doesn't desire other women. It also kills intestinal worms. And some say that it even takes away jealousy and brings in love.
That's the Wonder Bread at the store.
Amalei Rabba le Rava Bar Mari. Rabba says to Rava Bar Mari, Minaha Milsa Damri Inshi. Where's the source for what people say? Shitin Rehiti Rahut, Matal Gavra the Mitzafra Karach. 60 people can run, and they can't catch up to the person that ate breakfast. The rabbis say that you should wake up early and eat in the summer because of the heat, in the winter because of the cold. Amarle, so he responded, you won't be hungry, you won't be thirsty, and you won't be hit by the heat or the sun. Why won't you be hit by this? Because you're not hungry and you're not thirsty, because you ate. So Rabbah says to Rav Mari, says, you're saying that it's from there, but I say it's from here. You will serve Hashem God. He will bless your bread and your water. Says you will serve Hashem God. That's referring to prayer and Kriyashma. He will bless your bread and your water. This is referring to the bread and with salt and the jug of water. From then on, you'll be healed from all illnesses inside you. I'll remove the illnesses. Amar le Rav Yehuda le Rav Ada Meshucha. Rav Yehuda says to Rav Abba Meshucha, is that a new piece in your thing?
Yeah. Rav
Yehuda? Yes, let's leave it there. Okay, stop right there.
Yeah, what if it's what if the situation like we're in right now, we're just wanting to study, but we're going to make it afterwards? So is it better to say Kriya Shema with the blessing in the morning, or
the earlier the better?